Today you're going to learn how to solve one-step addition and subtraction equations. Okay, before we can solve one-step equations, or any kind of equation really, we have to know some basic undo operations. And there is another little video that you'll watch after this that has a pretty cool song about undoing it. So before we can solve equations, we need to know what the opposite operations are. So if we are adding something, so if we're doing addition, what do you think undoes addition? Hopefully you would say subtraction. It's the opposite, or the inverse operation. The opposite of multiplication is division, and the opposite of division is multiplication. And we won't be doing this year, but it's still good to know. The opposite of squaring a number, so like x squared, is the square root. That funny little symbol like that, that's the square root sign, or a radical. Okay, let's look at this little tip down here. This is important to remember. Don't forget, when you have a variable, multiplication is usually written without a sign. Example, 3m. And division is usually written like a fraction. Example, x over 2. Now that we're doing algebra, our days of seeing the division house are pretty much over. We pretty much will be using fractions now as division problems, almost all the time. Okay. Today's objective will be that when you finish this lesson, you should be able to solve equations using addition and subtraction. Okay, those are the two things that we'll be focusing on. When you think about algebra, you should think about a scale, okay? A scale has to stay balanced in order for it to be even, right? So, for example, if you look at this scale, you can see that on one side we have r plus 6, and the other side we have 7. The scale seems perfectly level, so that means it has to be in balance. So what do you think the value of r is if we are saying that these two things are equal? Think about that. Think about it to yourself, and think about what the value of r could be. Once you think you know, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how we would do this without doing it just in our head. To solve an algebraic equation, the biggest rule is you must get the variable by itself. That is the most important thing to remember when you are solving algebraic equations. Okay, I'm going to put a star by that. Okay, so what number is on the same side as r? If you look up here, r is with a 6. Okay, you also can see that it is being added. So we're going to have to use our undo operation of subtraction. So to get r by itself, we must undo the add 6. Oops, that says 16. I shouldn't say 16. Let's call that 6. That's a little typo. What is the opposite of addition? Hopefully you said subtraction. So we need to subtract 6. So let's show it. This is a really great way to solve algebraic equations, and this is the way that we would like to see you solving your equations. Draw the river to separate the equations into two sides. You can see this line straight through right at the equal sign. That's where you want to draw your river. Okay? Then you look to find your operation, which is addition. If you're going to have addition problem, you would use subtraction to undo it. So you subtract 6 from both sides. You must be fair to both sides. You can't subtract from one side without subtracting from the other, or the scale would tip. Simplify vertically, so that just means to subtract 6. So if you can see here, if we subtract 6, we're left with just r, because 6 minus 6 is 0. So you could say r plus 0, because you've subtracted it. And then 7 minus 6 is 1. Now, the last thing you should always do when you solve equations is check your answer by substituting your answer back into the problem. So that just means we took the 1 that we found, we put it back into the original equation, 1 plus 6 equals 7. If we've done everything correctly, that will be true. If we created a false sentence or a false statement, then we've solved it incorrectly and we should fix it. There's really no excuse to get an algebra equation wrong because you can check your answer. Okay, this time I want you to try this on your own. Solve x plus 2 equals 13. Get the variable by itself. What is your first step? So think about these choices. Add 2 to both sides, subtract 2 from both sides, add 3 to both sides, or subtract 3 from both sides. What do you think that you should do? Circle the correct answer in your notes. Press pause until you've finished answering, and then when you're ready, press play. Hopefully, you looked at this and said, this is an addition problem, so that means I have to undo it with subtraction. So that means that I could cross these two out right away. So I'm going to cross out the adding ones because we know we have to subtract because we have to undo. If I subtract 3 from both sides, that's not going to help me at all. That's not going to get x by himself. So my only reasonable choice is to subtract 2 from both sides. Let's try this one. Solve x plus 2. This is actually the same problem. So let's just try it now with the river. Okay, so solve x plus 2 equals 13. We drew the river. Now we want to subtract the 2 from both sides. That leaves us with x by himself. And 13 minus 2 equals 11. Don't forget to check your answer by substituting it. 11 plus 2 certainly equals 13. On homework and tests, be sure to check your work. There's no reason why you should miss a problem. Okay, solve this one. 8 equals m minus 3. Now this time I want you to think about, this is subtraction. We have to do the opposite of subtraction to solve this. So I want you to try this on your own. Press pause and then come back and let me know what you've got, and then we'll solve it together. When you're ready, let's go to the next screen. Okay, draw the river to separate the equation into 2 sides. That's what we've done. As we noted before, this is subtraction. We know that addition undoes subtraction, so we should add 3 to both sides, and we will find that 11 equals m. Check your answer by substituting it back in. 8 equals 11 minus 3. That is true. You are doing awesome. Okay, let's do this one. Okay, y minus 3 equals 7. Again, this is a subtraction problem, so we need to add 3 to both sides. Y is going to equal 10. 10 minus 3 equals 7. That is correct. Okay, one more example. X plus 2 equals 15. If we add 2, if we are adding 2, we need to subtract 2 from both sides in order to solve it. We will get x equals 13. 13 plus 2 equals 15, and that is the correct answer. Last one. This one I want you to try on your own. Y plus 3 equals 7. Remember, you are adding in this problem, so remember what you should do to undo it. Press pause until you've answered, and then press play when you're ready to check your solution. Okay, welcome back. Let's check it. Let's draw the river. Okay, this is an addition problem, so we need to subtract 3 from both sides in order to solve it. Y equals 7 minus 3 is 4. Let's never forget to check our solution. 4 plus 3 certainly equals 7. Good job. Okay, let's talk about a couple of properties. Okay, the subtraction property of equality. If you subtract the same number from each side of the equation, the two sides will remain equal. You should write equal in your notes. Let's now take our skills and try to do a word problem. Okay? Ruben and Tariq have 245.5 downloaded minutes of music. If Ruben has 132 minutes, how many belong? Oh, I meant to say how many belong to Tariq. Oh, let's just fix that. Hopefully, you will catch my error and also fix it. Write and solve an addition equation to find out how many minutes belong to Tariq. What do you need to find? Okay, this is the question. Okay, so what do we need to find? The number of minutes Tariq has. The number of minutes that belong to Tariq. How many minutes of music have they downloaded together? Well, that one shows right up here, so it's 245.5. What equation could be used to represent the situation? Now, this is a skill that can be very difficult to write an equation from a word problem. Okay, what you want to look for are some key words. The words have and is, those tend to mean equal, so let's write that up here. Is means equal. A lot of times have or has are equal. Those help us. So we know that when we're writing our equation, I often look for the equal first. So I'm going to write that in. Then we want to find the variable. That's usually found in the question. So you look and you say, write and solve an addition equation to find out how many minutes belong to Tariq. So that's the question. That's what we need to find, is how many that Tariq has. So that's going to be T. Now how do we find T? If Ruben has 132, Tariq has some number, and the total is 245.5, hopefully you would say, well, that's pretty easy. 132 Ruben's amount plus, let's use, instead of using T because it might look like the plus sign, let's use Q. 132 plus Q equals 245.5. What does the variable represent? It represents Tariq's minutes. Okay, what's going to be our first step to solving this? Look at the equation. It's an addition equation. So we would undo by subtracting, right? Undo the addition. So we will subtract 132 from both sides. Okay, I'm going to make a little bit more room here so that I can show that for you. So let's show the equation. You can maybe add another page to write this. 132 plus Q equals 245. Oops, I need to make more room. $132 plus Q equals 245.5. So let's subtract 132 from both sides. Line up the dots just like the Rapid Mathematician says. I'm going to draw the river. So Q equals, let's subtract here, bring down my decimal just like the Rapid Mathematician says. 5 minus 2 is 3. 4 minus 3 is 1. 1. So Tariq has 113.5 minutes. Okay, should we check that? Of course. Okay, so let's check it by plugging it back in. 113.5 plus 132 should equal 245.5, and it does. Good job. All right, let's go to another example. If you add the same number to each side of the equation, the two sides remain equal. Let's do a word problem. At age 25, German Titov of Russian was the youngest person to travel into space. This is 52 years less than the oldest person to travel in space, John Glenn. How old was John Glenn? Write and solve a subtraction equation. Okay, so it tells you to write and solve a subtraction equation, excuse me. So that means it has to be a subtraction problem. Okay, what do you know, or what do you need to find? Okay, you need to find how old Glenn was. Okay, so you can write that down. How old John Glenn was. That's the question that's being asked. You can always look and see in the problem. How many years older than German Titov was John Glenn? Well, how many years older than him was he? He was 52 years less than the oldest person, so that means that John Glenn was 52 years older than him. What equation could be used to write this situation? Well, if we were to have some sort of a bar diagram, we would have our total, which would be the age, and we would write something like John Glenn's age, or age, minus 25, which was German Titov's age, equals 52. Because they tell us that right here. This is 52 years less than the oldest person to travel in space. The variable represents John Glenn's age. What is the first step in solving this equation? Well, the addition property of equality tells us that to undo subtraction, we should do addition. So we should undo subtraction. Sorry, my writing. By doing addition. Let me just kind of, hopefully I can erase this. I'll fix it. Let me just write that a little neater for you guys. Subtraction. Okay, so the first step in doing the equation, so we would do A minus 25 equals 52. Draw your river, add 25 to both sides, and then we get A equals 77. So John Glenn was 77 years old. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you. And if you want to check your answer, you always know that you can take your variable and just plop it right back in and do 77 minus 25 equals 52. You can check that on your calculator. And yes, that is correct. Okay, hopefully this all makes sense to you, and you will do great at solving addition and subtraction equations. Bye for now.